Hey everyone, this is More Than Just Trucks, a podcast for gearheads, truckers, and anyone who wants to learn more about the trucking industry. This podcast is sponsored by Truck Country and Stoops-Freightliner. Come along with me as we dive deeper into what makes this $700 billion industry an essential part of all our lives. Here, we will interview industry leaders, educators, and more as we aim to inform the population on all things trucking. Hello and welcome to More Than Just Trucks podcast. I'm your host, Ray Clark, and on today's show, we will dig into styles of training, meaning virtual versus hands-on and in-person. As most of you trainers and educators out there, we all saw some changes in the world in the past close to 2 years now, right? And how do we keep this rolling when everything gets locked down from travel? So with me today, I have a couple of our trainers that work for us, one on our Truck Country side, one on our Stoop side. And I also have a fixed ops manager currently, and it's got a good perspective because he's kind of come from the floor up. He's been a technician himself. So he's been in training, he's been in management side of it. So he's kind of seen both roads and paths that we've had to give out through the years. And again, but I have got two of our lead trainers, and we'll announce them. So welcome Andy Hedrick and John Surber, along with Eric Gustavus. Let's start by giving the audience a little hello from you guys and a little background so that they understand and know where you guys all came from. And let's start with you, Andy.
All right, my name's Andy Hedrick. I've been a trainer here for a little over 2 years. A little bit of my background, I served in the U.S. Army. Got 22 years in the industry, all of that are with Truck Country. Come from the service side. I've been a technician, service writer, fill-in foreman, all the way up to assistant service manager. And that's when June 2019, I came over here to the training center.
Yeah, nice. And Eric, what's a little bit of your background?
I've been a fixed operations manager at this location now for about 2.5 years. I've been in parts. I've been in technician for about 7 years. I was a fixed ops at a different Truck Country location. Also as a service writer. So I've been around quite of our locations and been in pretty much every department, working with all the techs, parts, service.
Last but not least, for our most expertise in training, Mr. John Surber.
Hey, everybody. John Surber. Been in the repair trucking business, if you will, for over 40 years. Been a dealer trainer now for the Stoops group, Truck Hunter group now for right at around 23 of those. Worked on a little bit of everything. Training has really been fulfilling, and I love it. I'm ready to answer some questions.
Cool, good. And this is for me, this is kind of, I know it's, some of our audience and listeners will be like, this was preempted. It's all in-house. Well, I'm here to tell you that we're all in different segments of the world. Eric is in northern Wisconsin, and John and I only because of my week here at Indianapolis, but we're off here in Indianapolis Training Center, and Andy's in Dubuque, Iowa. But I'm really looking. This has been on my mind for a little bit, and the subject, as we progress through this last couple of years with COVID and the lockdown with training, it's really been. I think we've had multiple conversations. So I want to start with you, Eric, a little bit on the management side of it. And you've been a tech, so you've had that training. You've been in-house. You know what it's like to take the online courses and then come into the instructor led. But how did it feel in the shop when we started announcing and saying, "Hey, we've got some virtual training. This is kind of the direction we're going to have to go"?
A lot of my guys up here were actually kind of relieved. They wanted the continued training, and this is another chance that they could get the continued training. And then they also kind of enjoyed the fact that they could go home at night when they were done. They didn't really have to change their daily routine. They were still coming to the shop here, and on your lunch breaks, still got to hang with your normal guys and stuff like that. So that it worked out really well.
So really, I mean, if you look at that, the effects really, I mean, was very positive. So the atmosphere was good, right? I mean, nobody had any downfalls or anything.
Every time any of the techs went through that training, everybody was like, that was a really good training class. We got some good information out of there. And like I said, a lot of them just really liked the fact that they could go home right afterward and we weren't traveling down to Dubuque for training or down to Chicago for training or stuff like that. So,
Okay. Yeah. And we heard, and I'll elaborate as we go in and those questions pop up, but we heard a little bit of differences on both sides as far as the pros and cons. But so for you trainers, what was your thought when like that initial word come out and it's like, okay, hey, we kind of got to close down in a sense our facility because travel shut down. What do we do? I mean, what was your initial thoughts for the direction that we had to take?
I'd say at first and foremost, you kind of get the deer in the headlight look as far as, okay, what do we do now? Because I still remember I had my class upstairs, and then Ray, you came up to me and said, we're shutting down and there's not going to be any travel. So at that point, you're struggling to get your guys taken care of for the end of that training. And then you always get the question from the students as far as, okay, when am I coming back? And knowing that everything was unknown at the time, again, that was, we got to figure something out and figure out the best way that we can produce training to technicians and make it quality for them.
Yeah, John, what did you see here at the Stoops side of things?
Well, I think it was a huge shock to the system. Overall, we kind of sat back and said, okay, now what? What are we going to do? What's our future? Really, nobody knew what this whole COVID thing was going to do. We didn't know how the company was going to react right away. We didn't know how our technicians would react. You know, are we still going to be able to meet in person, even the short distance our center is from the main dealership? So it was a big shock, and we had to really step back and start thinking of different ways.
Yeah, I know that when we announced all that, and it's like, okay, to me, challenges are just something that I kind of thrive on from time to time. I love it when somebody tells me you can't do that or this can't be done. I mean, that was my tech mentality anyways. The truck's broke. I don't know if you can fix it. It was like, I'm going to show you that I can or find a way that I can. So when presented with this, I think I challenged all you guys, meaning the trainers, with, all right, how do we do this, right? What's our platforms that we use? Because we really didn't have we had some WebEx and Zoom was new and really coming out as far as in the forefront new wise. I mean, it'd always been there before. Teams had just started out for us and came kind of in the middle of the road there, but it was like, man, how do we do this? I mean, are we supposed to FaceTime people or what was a platform on this? One of the things that I did hear, and Eric, you were talking about it, as far as the benefits and stuff, where the tech still got to kind of live their day, right? I mean, they were still going to work, hanging out with their guys at lunchtime and stuff. But I also heard where it was like in a technician's mindset, right? And I think all of us have been techs. So it's like, we have to do that hands-on. I get it. Seeing it, it's like sitting in class on some of those classes that are more theory than hands-on. I mean, how do you answer that when these guys say that to you?
Definitely the TTI students were struggling with that one. A little younger crew, definitely. I mean, at the time it was, this is how we're gonna have to do it, and we will get you back in person classes, but just kind of reassuring them that the training doesn't stop just in front of the computer, and continue the training on the floor and have all support that we can get.
Yeah, and I think that's where, that's a good perspective, Eric, right? So as a manager, that support back on the floor. And I know we in the training department have really tried to keep pushing and keep evolving that coaching program. And I think that's the biggest thing that probably helped us as a company overall push through some of that, right? Because we were able to get that support from the training side of saying, hey, look, we're giving these guys virtual training, but they need some hands-on, real life activities to go along with this training in the background. So Andy, if I remember right, I mean, you were kind of one of the ones that actually jumped in both feet. I mean, you were pretty anxious to, all right, like we're going to get this going for us, and I'm going to figure it out here. What encouraged you really to get that button pushed and keep moving forward on that?
So I think the big thing, even from the get-go, from when you mentioned before, when we all got that shock of, okay, there's no travel. Just the fact of looking at our calendars and seeing the magnitude of training that is going to be missed from, for an unknown time frame. From that point on, the gears start to turn on how we can still get the information out. And I know as a training group, we'd hold meetings and huddles. And I know you and I did a lot of test sessions with the various video chat entities, if you would, as far as seeing what would work best for our options. And then once we knew that we had Zoom, the interactivity with that, what I would do sometimes at home is I'd be looking at recordings from different people that had students in class. And, the thought came across that, hey, we can do this as well, with help from you pushing us, of course. And it was going to be okay. We're going to do this. So at that point, we deciphered the best way to present the material from a classroom standpoint. Also include the student interactions, which in my book was key to, as far as what Eric alluded to, as far as, hey, that session that I had today, it was really good, really informative, and that's what kept them coming back for that.
Yeah.
But whether it be a screen share from a student, a schematic drawing that the student could use, a markup tool on to identify, or even when we would do those live shop exercises where the instructor would go out to a training aid. And then we have, for lack of a better terms, a camera person recording it and going through and doing those various shop activities that we would normally do as a class in the books, whether it be on the TTP side or whether it be with our traditional groups, was really important as far as figuring out the best way to do that, as far as keeping them focused.
That's where I thought it was pretty cool when you and Todd, our the other instructor there, kind of did that double duty is almost like a movie acting role, right? Is we had producer, director, and camera guys all in one session at times. It seemed like, where it's, you actually flip the phone on into the Zoom meeting, and now everybody's out into the shop, or the trainers are out in the shop, and they're showing and instructing. So John, senior trainer, right? 20 plus years in the industry. How do you feel? I mean, because I've been around 14 years with DTNA. I mean, Western Star took that same direction now, and I know you've been leading some of those virtual classes with that. So how do you think it went? What's your thoughts on that?
I think one of the biggest things to all of this was the sudden shock that, hey, we have to do this now. It's not like it's something we planned. In other words, it's not something we mapped out, we developed, and we went and did. It was pretty much get up, come in, and this is what's got to be done. Overall, most of the virtual training went fairly good. Of course, some technology glitches here and there. Comments back from the techs, ranged from, well, this was kind of cool, but I really want my hands on it, that kind of stuff. For being in the business as long as I have, doing the training as long as I have, yes, I love to have the students in front of me. They love to touch things. but I think it was really cool the way the company just kind of gathered things up and hit the ground running. It's something over all of my years of going to training, doing training, and all that, I've never really witnessed. And I thought the process was pretty cool. I believe it's gone fairly good. There's definitely a place in our world for it now. We still have to think about that hands-on, but this definitely has its place.
Yeah, I know in early conversations, like you said, I think the company support, the different things with our mentality, we really did like both Andy said and you said it, it's like that sudden shock, and it was like the deer in the headlight, but then it was like a snap and we were off and running. Putting the programs together and saying, okay, so if I got to do this, how can I do it via video? What do I need to share? How do I share? How do I interact? I mean, there was some pretty cool things, and that's what I think we liked more about Zoom. And either Andy or John, feel free to answer on this. The interactions that you could do with Zoom, and how did you guys make that work? I mean, like me, I envisioned like, okay, so the guys could literally take either control or annotate and start drawing and following circuits for you. I mean, is that the way you guys had things kind of rolling at times?
That part of it was pretty cool and amazing to me. I'm not a super computer technical kind of guy, being the age I am, but I thought Zoom really fit good because of that fact that we could hand it off to them and ask them, okay, look up this or show me this or whatever. What do you think, Andy?
Well, I think the biggest thing was the screen share aspect that the students could do, because this way, twofold, we're keeping them engaged, and we're also making sure that there's, still following along with everything. And then to Ray's point, as far as the screen or the annotations, a lot of times what I would do with my guys, if we were doing a drawing or schematic, I'd give them the star, the check mark, and I'd ask the different students, different questions and have them actually annotate or draw it out with that particular drawing schematic. We've even used a whiteboard before too, as far as making circuitry, having them build the circuit instead of doing it on a piece of paper and a pen. They're actually doing it with the colors in relation to our whiteboard.
Yeah, so you mentioned something, right? The interactivity. So Eric and I sit back as managers, and you guys got anywhere from, let's say, 6 to 8 guys out in front of you, not literally, but via computer. How do you manage that and know they're paying attention? I mean, what was your control of that one? I mean, like I said, Eric and I are sitting back saying we're managers, saying, okay, yeah, we've been in enough of these Zoom meetings where we don't turn cameras on and know that when muted, these guys are talking to whoever comes in their office, they're answering emails, they're looking up different things. And it's like, how do you control that?
Well, that's where you make sure to have that group cameras on at all times. I know the one thing I think we thought about doing, but we never really did, was even your questionnaires. I think that's the one point we didn't quite get to yet, as far as popping those up. But I know as far as that portion of it goes, making sure they're not doing anything they're not supposed to be doing, it was cameras on. And granted, you're training, talking about a subject, but yet you still need to monitor each one of those students. I've done it to where I've had Todd monitor them, and if we've seen an issue, we corrected it. And we did see quite a few issues, but we did try to correct it. And once they got to the point where they knew and understood that, hey, I got to pay attention to this, I'll say most of our problems went away.
Yeah, I would say that probably popping those quick questions and calling people out. John, how did you feel your technician attention span went with your virtual training?
Well, one of the challenges we had, I think this whole thing hit our IT departments pretty heavy and head on too, because that's really having camera access for technicians and stuff. When it all started, that was kind of a no-no. And so it was an adjustment there. But I kind of did the same thing Andy did. We would have somebody sit to the side monitoring. And I've got to say, I'm pretty proud of all the guys that I did virtual training with, even guys from your side. I really didn't have that much trouble, but we had somebody monitoring it. And I would agree with Andy, that's something that is a must, because it'd be too easy for them just to sit back. The pop-up quizzes and stuff, I like that idea. I think we need to incorporate that in more on top of what we're doing.
So Eric, I mean, as a manager, how do you feel? I mean, was it easy enough for you? I know you're at a smaller location, but I guess let's think broad perspective of service managers. How do you manage that you put, let's say, techs in a break room and say, okay, hey, I know you got training. Here's your laptop and stuff. Make sure you get this done. What's your perspective as a manager? How do you manage through that?
Definitely can't have them in the training room or the break room. Obviously, as a manager, we go through lots of meetings and stuff like that. You get sidetracked many times. So just kind of looking at it ahead of time and kind of planning, I made sure all the techs that were doing the virtual training were isolated. They're in our back office, that there was no distractions. There was no phone in there. There's no techs walking in there. They weren't in the break room with the other techs. So that somebody walked through there, I knew they could be 100% focused, and there was zero distractions that I could actually control at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. The one other thing too that I was just thinking of, and I know I've talked about it in some different conversations with groups, but not so much like you as a manager, is I look at some of the aspects too as we, as technicians, they have to stay certified. They have to keep this training going, right? And then I look at the cost overall of training, sending a tech from, even your location, and let's say even Wausau, which is north, right? From these northern Wisconsin areas, and sending guys down, and the cost and expense, I would think that the company savings in general, but again, I'm trying to establish, is there value in it? Was there some savings, or was it all about the savings? I mean, what was your take on the cost expense side? Because it had to have been some huge savings from travel and meals and hotel, right?
Well, definitely. When you're looking at a 3-day class, that's 4-day hotel, 4 days of food, and then 4 days of no tech being here. Even in point of, because my location's so small, even if I ran into a scenario where I have specialty techs for special areas, he's on lunch, I can run something by him here real quick. He's right here. So it definitely all around definite savings.
Yeah. So kind of a group question to all you guys, and I'd like to hear a little bit from each one of you. Pros and cons, right? We've kind of hit a various of pros, not too many cons I've really heard out there, but let's start with Andy. What are your pros on the virtual training?
Well, just like you and Eric were talking about as far as cost, I would say that was the big thing for each one of the dealership. Other thing we can look at as trainers, and John, I believe you'll agree with me on this, as far as trying new ways of presenting our material. Knowing that we didn't have them in front of us, it was a challenge. I thought it was a good challenge, and I thought we did pretty well at it.
Yeah. Yep. John, what do you think? What are the pros? What's all the good points that came out of this?
Well, one of the pros for me through this and going forward would be that we can use it as a tool to deliver quick training. Maybe not necessarily something that they have to be present in, but something we can deliver to them virtually. Then we still cut that cost of the travel, the hotel, everything that Eric was talking about, we cut that out. Some of the cons for me was just the tech, some of them complaining they couldn't put their hands on it. They would rather be there so they could see it. And some of that comes from us introducing a brand new product to guys that couldn't even see it yet. They could look at pictures, but that's it.
Yeah.
You know, we introduced a brand new truck model to them virtually. And at first they're like, I really want to touch this thing. So,
Yeah. Eric, I think you probably will agree with everybody as far as pros. What did you see with cons? Were there any cons on your side that you were seeing or hearing?
Definitely that hands-on. You take any kind of technician, I don't care who it is, any kind of tech, and you try to put them in an office for 8 hours, they're going to get bored. They're going to start to get sidetracked a little bit because we're all hands-on. It's the career we're in, the industry we're in. So trying to keep them involved in that training is definitely going to be one of the cons that I see.
Yeah, and I think Andy probably the same thing, right?
Yeah, I'd say for the most part. I mean, the big thing was the interaction itself with the students, not necessarily the hands-on, which I think we can all agree on. Them not getting their hands on it, getting dirty is a big thing, but just the simple interaction with them, as far as the true face-to-face.
Oh, there you go. Something, yeah, something
the
hasn't
person
been
to person, exactly.
Very
Then
good
honestly,
point.
I think carryover too, as far as backing up and have to repeat, especially when we finally started getting guys in for class, to where, okay, we did all that virtual stuff. Now you guys are coming in just for the hands-on. And I know my group that I went with, as far as my TTP, I mean, we had 6 classes, I think it was,
right.
as far as modules. And now I'm going back and repeating a lot of it to the point where they understand it, which isn't a bad thing. But it seemed to be a lot more than normal. The last thing is what I'll say is as far as time frames. So normally we'd do 2 2-hour sessions, which would only be 4 hours a day. So if we think about an 8-hour day, one day is going to actually equal 2 days as far as doing it virtual versus them being here and us being able to put it on.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you look at maybe some cost expense, for Eric as a manager, he's looking at saying, okay, so let's just say it was a 1-day class, right? He's actually going to lose a tech off the floor for 2 days, but he's still in house and he's still hopefully recouping some ROI on that. But so I think recapping, the pros were really pretty much the same thing and I think the benefit for me as a overall department head was that we picked the ball up and ran, and we found out that this can work into our world going forward. And I think we can all agree on that there is a place for it, right? And how do we make it better? How do we make it more interactive? As everyone said, and we all know that the technicians, they have to touch it, they have to feel it, they have to do it themselves to kind of really get that training perspective kind of really socked right in, right? So you made that point, Andy, where you do that follow-up. And I know we talked about that is, do you train them? And when they can come back, is that on-site visit now shorter, right? So you've given them all this virtual training, hours of it, weeks ahead of time. And now it's like, okay, so the normal class would have, let's say it was 4 days worth of hands-on training. And can you really bring that? Can you cut that in half now so that the expense is still dropping down where, okay, we've already given you everything we can virtually. We're bringing you back in now for 2 days as a follow-up with the hands-on side of it versus a full 4 days here. And now as a management team, they can look at it and saying, okay, it's still kind of a win-win situation and he's still getting certified. He's still getting that training and stuff. But so it leads me into, how do you take the virtual training that we know will work, maybe not 100% fit, right? But we know it works. And Microsoft and Google, they've got the HoloLens out there. They've got the Google glasses, I believe. How do you guys feel? I mean, I've dipped my toes in that water a little bit. I've seen some live demos with the Microsoft Halo lens. I really want to, it would be cool to think that, you know, how much training could you do with those things? What do you guys feel on that? John, what's your thoughts on, you know, if you want to call it moving into the future with like something like a Microsoft Halo lens?
Well, from what I've seen of the Halo lens, I don't know much about the Google one, but from what I've seen, I definitely see a place where it could be mixed in to the virtual training, just from the fact Andy made the point of that kind of personal touch, that one-on-one reaction. From what I've viewed about the Halo and DTNA demonstrating it and all, it would be a way to, if the situation's right, where you could have it and you could actually touch the truck, touch different things while you're doing your training, and it would maybe help them understand what you're talking about, your talking point at, you know, at the time you're doing it.
Yeah. Eric, have you been following much in the industry on that side of it as far as like the virtual reality and stuff?
Unfortunately, no, I have not.
Okay. Andy, what's your thoughts?
Well, I just remember from our trainer update that we had, as far as on the virtual side, the one stickler that I might say from the HoloLens or the HoloLens 2 is that you actually needed the truck there in order to view it. Am I correct by making that statement?
I believe so. From what I understand is you can build these programs into, you know, a typical Windows platform. And that's where it was cool for me. And I know that I think it takes a lot of IT gurus, we'll call them, to really build some of that platform. I mean, if you look at it nowadays, and I'm going to throw this out there, is we've recently had a company come in and do some 3D recording. And we're being involved with the schools with the J Junior Achievement Job Sparks, where the kids can go to this 3D picture, in a sense, of the truck, right? And start clicking on all these points and literally move around the truck. I mean, I think there's so much out there right now that really that could move the industry to help, really from a high school standpoint right out through to a tech school into our own training departments itself with some of this. I think it's just taking the initiative and really outside the box thinking, because when I saw that 3D camera and its process and what they were capturing, I'm like, well, heck, you know, I'm looking at the same perspective saying, hey, why, you know, we should be having, every training department should have a 3D camera, because I can't imagine if what you could do to onboard a person, right? And really, I mean, not just a picture, but now we have a literally almost a virtual reality engine that this new technician could walk around and say, oh yeah, that's this, and this, and literally walk around that engine, walk around that truck. And then there's your, maybe your aptitude test right there, right? How much do they really know in person? And then take that to the next level and say, okay, training session 1, and how many times could you capture that? So,
I mean, it's a great concept. The one thing I will say, you know, the HoloLens, to me, it's a great product. But I think moving forward, instead of, you know, because the techs aren't always going to be able to have those trucks at the shop. What I'd like to see is like a virtual shop to where they got each brand of truck, whatever it's training on, whether it be 49X, Cascadia, Columbia, even as far as that goes, to where they can actually take that engine, pull it out of the truck. And like you said, there they are working on their engine.
Be a little partial to the Freightliner product, I see.
It's what I know.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of future for us really to keep moving forward and to trying to do different things with this virtual training and producing still some quality training aspects out there for our technicians and stuff. So, Well, honestly, great. I mean, that's really was my point of subject for today's podcast was that. John, got any thoughts?
Just that I think what's going to happen in the next few years to the next 10 years is going to be really, really interesting, not only with the various truck chassis and transmissions and stuff like that out there getting more electronic. How we deliver training should get really interesting.
Yeah, definitely 100% on that one for sure. It's I think the whole industry, I mean, we're looking at electric trucks now, autonomous trucks are already kind of been in the back burner and on the roads already in pilot and beta testing. And, now we're talking pretty heavy on the electronic truck side of it. So there'll be another podcast topic coming up is probably the world of electrical, right? Well, I want to thank you guys all today for joining me and your thoughts and input. Eric, John, Andy, thank you very much for this. And thank you to the listeners today for our More Than Just Trucks podcast. And it's sponsored by Truck Country Stoops, one of the largest family owned and operated Freightliner dealership groups in the U.S. today. Check us out at truckcountry.com for all our locations, point of contacts, and everything else. So again, if you got any suggestions, thoughts for the podcast, feel free to reach out and hit me up at podcast@truckcountry.com. Again, that's podcast@truckcountry.com. And again, I thank everybody for the show and their thoughts and input on this. It was a good one. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.